Hey, howdy, folks. How's it going? I am your guest host for this segment of Every Library's Lives Banned Books Week Fest. Every Library is the National Political Action Committee for libraries. The last few years have seen an alarming rise in the number of book bans in schools and public libraries around the country. Every library has been directly involved in over 100 local campaigns to oppose censorship and defend the First Amendment, helping to restore books and preserve access. Its Fight for the First campaign platform, combined with its pro bono campaign advising, is making a difference. I'd like to invite you to check it out at fightforthefirst.org. All week, Every Library Live is focusing on not only the problem of book bans, but also on changing the headlines. We need to reconnect with reading and the joy it brings. That's why I'm so excited to talk with Veera Hiranandani, Ryan Estrada, and Alex Schumacher about their connections to readers and libraries. We also want to focus on Authors Against Book Bans, a coalition of writers, illustrators, anthology editors, and contributors, and other book creators who stand united against the deeply unconstitutional movement to limit the freedom to read, and Every Library's coalition partner in many campaigns against censorship. If you don't know me, I'm Rex Ogle, author of books like Free Lunch, Four Eyes, and I also write under the pen name Ray Terciero, including books like North Ranger and Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, which was banned in Louisiana and my home state of Texas. Thanks to the hard work of librarians and community members, I am happy to say that it has since been put back on bookshelves for young readers to discover. But enough about me. Let's get to our three amazing creators. Here we have Veera Hiranandani, Newbery Honor-winning author of The Night Diary and Amil and The After. Her acclaimed works explore cultural heritage and identity. Her notable books include The Whole Story of Half a Girl and How to Find What You're Not Looking For, which won the Sidney Taylor Book Award. We also have Ryan Estrada, adventurous author of Banned Book Club, Occulted, and the Student Ambassador series. Estrada's global experiences and work with Star Trek and Garfield bring a unique perspective on literary freedom. His next book is No Rules Tonight. And finally, we have Alex Schumacher, dynamic creator of picture books, webcomics, and graphic novels. This year, he came out with The Effects of Pickled Herring, and Schumacher's innovative storytelling and humor are featured in comiccon.com and the Comic Book Yeti. Thanks for being here, y'all.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell everyone where you're at? Veera?
Sure. I am a little bit outside of New York City in Westchester County. I'm very happy to be here and very thankful for the work that every library does.
Agreed. Ryan, how about you?
I'm coming to you from Busan, South Korea, which, as I mentioned, if you've seen Black Panther, the scene where he's jumping around the bridge, that bridge is right out this window.
Amazing. And Alex, where are you at?
I am in San Francisco, California.
Nice. I am in Los Angeles, so we're enjoying sunny California weather. I hope all of you out there are having wonderful weather too. But let's get to the questions. So Veera, what made you want to become a writer? And was writing diverse books always a goal for you?
Well, I am somebody who always loved reading and writing. I think growing up wasn't always easy. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, and I always felt kind of a little outside of things, particularly because of my background. I'm from an interfaith family, and I'm biracial. So my mother grew up in New York and is Jewish, and my father originally is from India, it's Hindu, and I grew up in Connecticut, where there were not a lot of people representing those identities, let alone both identities. So my writing and reading came out of that. And the stories that I tell also come out of my own identity or my family history. And I'm really trying to just represent my experience. So, it wasn't necessarily an intention to kind of write diverse books in that way. It was just, this is me, and adding to what I hope would be a diverse landscape of literature that's good for everyone.
That's awesome. I'm really happy that we're entering this period of seeing books by non-white male writers, like the hundreds of years of books that have been going on for centuries and that are taught in classrooms, with Jane Austen and the Brontes, of course. But Ryan, you actually wrote a book called Banned Book Club. Can you tell us a little more about it and what your inspiration was?
Yeah, so a lot of people think Banned Book Club is a reaction to what's going on, but we started writing in 2017 before this wave of book banning started in America. And like growing up, book banning, it was something I never thought about. There was always like the one person in your neighborhood that complains, but nobody listens to them. And my only experience as a kid with book banning was, books, but my work being banned was in middle school. I did a comic about a bug called Wendell the Wasp, and it was banned from the newspaper because the principal thought it might offend white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And I'm like, sir, I don't know what that means, but it's a bug. But when this came about is I was hanging out with my wife, who I'd known for 10 years, and she casually mentions that years ago she was hunted down by the police for smuggling banned books. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, back up. And so I learned this true story. We were offered this book deal, and I started working on it, and we started interviewing all these people who literally risked their lives, who literally went to prison for reading books that one guy didn't like just because he happened to have done a coup and taken over the country and turned into a dictator. And so we made a book called Banned Book Club. That's my wife's true story. And by the time it came out, not only were books being banned in America, but our book became one of them, being banned in several states. And then I kept going. Like I kept meeting more people who'd done risked their lives. Like my friend Amy Rose, who grew up in a UFO death cult and used banned books to escape. We did a book with her called Occulted. And now our new book, No Rules Tonight, has more of Hyun-suk's story in 1980s Korea, reading banned books under a dictator. So it's kind of suddenly become this this thing that I love writing about, just because I've met so many people that it was so important to, and seeing that reflecting on what's going on now since the book came out, I realize there's a lot of work to be done.
It is a very scary world out there for some people. And I always want to congratulate people for getting a book banned, which maybe is a weird reaction. I just feel like it's a badge of honor. Like, obviously, I have something to say that people don't want to hear, which means it's probably important. And I feel that way about a lot of books. But my heart and prayers do go out to anyone dealing with that. Like, I cannot imagine dealing with that kind of stuff. That's actually really scary. Alex, you are both a writer and an artist. How do you feel visual storytelling unlocks the imagination of youth, and how is that affected by the loss of graphic novels in libraries?
Yeah, comics and graphic novels in particular have sort of taken off, lately, and they're one of the only actual, formats to be growing in things like sales and audiences. And I think the reason for that is that visual storytelling. It provides an immersive experience that's quite different than prose, which it's a different immersive experience, but it's one that provides this framework for how fantasy can kind of become a reality to some degree, because it exposes them to a lot of different art styles. It exposes them to a lot of different, narrative structures, and that's all happening kind of subliminally, but they're at that age where they're just absorbing all of that information regardless of whether or not it's overt. But we're also, outside of the art side, it's you can make something true because you're literally reading something by somebody who did just that. So we're kind of showing them, empowering their imagination by showing them that there are tangible, positive outcomes from engaging with your dreams. But that permission also kind of encourages autonomy and critical thinking, which frightens a certain subset of our populace. So they tend to react poorly. But it's often, visual storytelling is also often dismissed, which I find a little bit ironic for all the graphic novels that get banned, because it's thought of specifically in North America as this sort of, kids literature. If it has pictures, it's for babies. And it's this very reckless and inaccurate mindset that some people have, because visual learning is a very real thing. So, kids are often overwhelmed, reluctant readers are often overwhelmed or intimidated by purely prose books, because that amount of words is a little bit overwhelming for them for a variety of different reasons. So comics and graphic novels in particular are these wonderful bridges almost between movies and prose books that gives them this point of ingress that they really need. And if we're refusing to make these books accessible to them, or removing these books, that the kids who need them aren't going to get them, and we're doing a great disservice to them. We're spitting in the face of not only literacy and freedom of speech as a whole, but it's also a huge failing on our part if the effort is really to give the next generation an optimal chance at thriving. So that's really one of the roughest impacts that I think comes from the book bans. Not to mention the fact that not every family has $20 for every book that's banned to go put down. Some kids only get these books through libraries and schools. So we're really not helping them out by banning any of these.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's strange because I'm only 20, even though I was born in 1978. And so I grew up reading X-Men comics. And back then, I mean, adults were like, comic books are not literature. And I was like, comic books are books. Like I'm reading books.
Yep.
But like I had a teacher, Miss Pritchard, who would walk around the cafeteria at lunch and be like, why don't you read a real book? Like me and my best friend were reading comic books, X-Men, of course. And we're like, these are books. And she was like, they're not. But she came from a generation of when Tales from the Crypt was censored. Like that was the first book to ever be banned in the comic book world. And it's so amazing to see how far we've come. And graphic novels are a great gateway to actual prose books, especially now, like with social media. Kids are growing up on devices where it's text, art, text, art, text, art. And it's like graphic novels are such like a great way to go into reading. And I actually have a friend whose son is autistic and has a very hard time reading prose books, but graphic novels he can digest very easily. So
yeah, again, for a variety of reasons, they just connect with a group of kids, and those kids need those books. It's representation. It's formative for their brains. It is very essential, and sad that some people don't want to give them access to that.
100%. I mean, I think about X-Men, which was a very diverse team of heroes. Like they were from Africa and Russia and Japan, and they were from all over. And I loved that as a kid, just like Star Trek, the original one. And diversity is so important. And graphic novels are great because you see the diversity, you see the brown skin throughout. My abuela is from Mexico, and so like seeing my brown people makes me so happy. So I'm sure for other kids of different ethnicities and backgrounds, it's also good to see not only themselves in books but on covers. I mean, it's great.
I just want to quickly add, like whenever I hear people talk about comics like that, I tell them don't compare comics to prose, compare it to poetry. Because you're condensing down what would be in those paragraphs of text into an image and a sentence and letting the reader build out from that. When I write comics, it's really like writing poetry, figuring out what individual images and lines, because you have to keep these lines very short, is going to create the story in the reader's head. And so it allows the reader to do a lot of work themselves.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's why I don't like when people say that including visuals with storytelling limits the imagination. I think it does just the opposite in different ways, and you put it perfectly.
Yeah. Veera, what do you think about comic books and graphic novels?
I love them, of course. And I grew up reading like Garfield and Peanuts. I wasn't into so much I did a lot of Wonder Woman actually, and I really loved it. I had this like hardcover, collection. So I did read a lot of comics and comic strips growing up, and I really loved it. And I like drawing, and my grandfather would like teach me how to draw the Peanuts comics. So I would love to write a script for a graphic novel, but I don't think I'm not good enough to do the drawings.
Well, no, neither am I. I can draw stick figures.
But I agree, there are so many visual learners, and it just like lights up your brain. And I would really remember those comics like in a different way than I remembered prose stories, and I read both. Yeah. But I also wanted to comment on, you had said when you get have a banned book, it's almost like, well, congratulations, this badge of honor. And I remember thinking that too. But then when, this sort of new wave of banned books, and my book, The Night Diary, is part of that and banned in a lot of places in Florida and Texas. People will ask me, well, maybe they'll say congratulations. I'm like, but I think it's actually hurting the book and hurting sales, and also removing that experience of somebody who, the book is about a family having to leave their home during the partition of India. in 1947, and that's something my father's family experienced. So if there is a kid with a South Asian background who has a connection to that, and then the book isn't there, they will never experience seeing their family history in a book. I never experienced that growing up, and now it's like, you know, continuing on that sort of erasure of an experience that you never see, or all the kids who don't know about this huge piece of our global history, because I probably wouldn't know about it if I didn't have a family connection growing up where I did. They'll never know about it. And so I think people ask me, well, why is the book banned? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, there are brown people in it. You know, I just really don't know the answer. And for the hundreds and hundreds of books, and usually it's authors of color, queer authors, you know, those are the big majority of books getting banned. And it's just erasing those experiences. That's what it's trying to do.
I completely agree. It's so weird to me. I mean, I come from rural Texas in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up around a lot of intolerance, a lot of ignorance. And I mean, my stepdad, bless him, I mean, called me beaner, called me wetback. And he didn't say it with anger or vitriol or poison in his voice. It was just like, that's just what he called me. He thought that that was okay. That was acceptable. I mean, he also called me sissy and other words that I won't repeat. But I bring this up because I think it's so important to have these books because they open conversations. They help kids learn about stuff that they can then talk to adults, and hopefully they can talk to their parents. But I think some of these parents are the ones who are banning these books. But we have librarians, we have teachers, we have educators who are out there getting these books into the hands of the kids who need them. I mean, librarians in many ways saved my life as a kid. So I'm grateful to them, and I'm amazed by what they do every day now because they're essentially the frontline workers of a new war on America.
And risking their livelihoods just to get the books in kids' hands.
And sometimes their lives, depending on where they are. It's gotten pretty scary out there.
Yeah. I've talked to some librarians who what ends up in their social media accounts, like their DMs, is scary stuff. Stuff. And that's why it's so important for people to stand up and, you know, fight against banned books and vote and use every library and other organizations to like really get out there and help fix the world. But for a minute, I don't want to be completely serious. So I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite dinner? What is your favorite dessert? And what is your favorite banned book? I'll start so you'll have a moment to think. Favorite dinner, crunchy tacos. Beef with cheese, no tomatoes, because those are disgusting. Favorite dessert, probably tiramisu. And as for my favorite banned book, I mean, there's so many, but it would have to be Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I actually met her. I mean, I feel like super cool because I have like a first printing edition because I met her at like an indie comic book show, and I saw the book and I was so drawn to it, and I was like, I have to buy this. And I took it home and I read it in one sitting. And that is an experience that even I, as a queer man, don't understand. Like, I'm still, maybe because of my age, still learning to use proper pronouns and understand trans people who are in my community. And it's such an important book. And it really upsets me that that book is banned because I think it's helping so many kids out there. So yeah, favorite dinner, favorite dessert, favorite banned book. Who wants to go next? The pressure's on.
I don't know. I love all kinds of food, so many kinds of food. I always say, like, my favorite comfort foods are samosas and chicken matzo ball soup, you know, from both sides of my family. And they go well together. My favorite dessert is anything chocolate, like a really good chocolate mousse with whipped cream. Nothing's better. And I'm still thinking of banned books. I like wish I had a list, and then I'd be like, oh, right, that's my favorite book. I mean, one of my favorite books, and I think it's been banned, is The Giver by Lois, right? And that's one of my favorite books. So I'll throw that in there and keep thinking. I'm trying to think of more recent books, but yeah.
Anything that's been banned, I mean, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, all these books about the future, dystopian futures that we are now living in today have probably been banned. And real quick, I all of y'all an apology. Ryan, thank you. He hit me up on the chat because I mispronounced Maya. They use they, their pronouns. And see, I apologize. I am still learning. And this is part of our world now where the younger kids, the new generation, like they are growing up with new pronouns that I don't understand. And I'm always apologetic and I always want to be corrected. So Ryan, thank you. Maya, I apologize. Okay, who's next? Dinner, dessert, banned book.
I'll go. So I grew up in Salinas. I'm in San Francisco now, like I said, but Salinas is a little bit further south in California. It's on the Central Coast. Lots of migrant workers. It's the majority of the population is Mexican. So, I could say like my Bubby's brisket would be my favorite dinner, but realistically it's camarones a la diabla from like a really good taqueria. That's probably my favorite dinner. What was the other one? I've already forgotten.
Dessert.
Oh, dessert. I'm not a big dessert guy. But a couple of years ago, my mother-in-law found this chocolate babka from a place, I believe it's called Gold Belly in New York. Out of this world. I've never had anything like it. So that is, with a bullet, probably my favorite dessert. And banned book, maybe it's a little on the nose for me being a Jewish author, but I'm going to go with Mouse.
Excellent. Not to throw in a fun fact, but Art Spiegelman, who created Mouse, also created Garbage Pail Kids, which if you all know what Garbage Pail Kids are, if you don't know, look them up because they're amazing. I collected them when I was a kid. You could get 5 cards and a pink stick of bubble gum for 25 cents at Toys R Us, and it was amazing.
He did a lot of different styles throughout his career. It's really, he has a really interesting catalog.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, your turn.
Right. Yep. So for food, I'm gonna have to continue the theme and say a really good burrito, because living in Korea, there's a lot of great food, but it's often hard to find a good burrito. I once went to a place where I think someone had described burritos to them, and they're like, "I got it from here," and they served me a cold tortilla cracked in half with Heinz baked beans, uncooked, poured into it. And I'm like, I paid $8 for this, sir. What are you doing? Dessert, I'm gonna have to go with a Korean pancake called a hotak that you can get on the street. Like each one will take a year off your life, but mwah. And for banned books, I'm gonna have to say my favorite one to talk about is one called Zen Shorts that was banned in Florida right alongside my book. It's a children's book about stories of kindness illustrated by cartoon bears. And while the guy who banned it was on TV saying I'm removing the porn from schools, I have his documents of why he got these books banned. And that one was banned because its stories of radical empathy are incompatible with Christianity.
Which is not true. I have 2 degrees. One is in English lit, one is in comparative religion. And I had amazing professors. Dr. Michael White was one of them, who taught at Abilene Christian University for years, and then the University of Texas. He is like the foremost Christian scholar, and he always says, he's like, Jesus preached compassion and kindness and love. And for some reason that is lost a lot in the world today. And yeah, it's a little upsetting because we should all have compassion and kindness towards each other, especially through literature. And that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And I also want to just point out that
I don't want to get too into my long rant.
No, go ahead.
I don't get too long into my long rant, but the example he used from the book was literally a story from the Bible, but changed to be about cartoon bears. So I don't know.
I don't want those stories out there, apparently.
I mean, I do want to point out that I love that all of us have different favorite foods from different ethnicities, not necessarily our own, different cultures. I think it's so beautiful. I mean, growing up in Texas, I grew up on Italian pizza, lasagna, and Tex-Mex. I mean, that was pretty much everything. I didn't have sushi until I was 19. I'd never even heard of it. And when I had it, I was like, oh, magic in my mouth. This stuff is amazing.
Sushi might be a close second for me.
Same. Okay, let's return to some questions about book bans. And y'all can, this is a conversation, so feel free to jump in, but why did y'all sign on to be early members of Authors Against Banned Books? And what do you think authors can bring to the anti-censorship fight?
I mean, for me, just to jump in, with the rise in anti-Semitism, that was a big push for me to, not that I didn't want to be active before, but to actually take action and become part of what I thought was a regional group, but turned out to be a national movement, which is fantastic. There was even recently, I can't remember the organization, but there was a panel that was going to feature 2 authors along with a Jewish one, and the 2 Goy authors decided that they didn't want to sit alongside a Jew, and so they just canceled the panel. And these things are happening all over. So for me, I could sit here and stew and let those feelings fester and, yell at the walls, or I can, put up or shut up and do something. So for me, joining this group was at least doing something instead of just, screaming and raving.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it was just like ever since kind of 2016 happened,
Yeah.
and just looking at the changes in our country and the sort of increase in intolerance and so many different kinds of xenophobia and racism and
Disinformation.
yeah, all these ways to kind of spread hate towards marginalized groups, and and just feeling that for so many years. And yeah, and so I was just grateful for this, Authors Against Book Bans, and just wanted to kind of be a part of it. And because you're always wondering, like, what can I do, what can I support, what can I be a part of? And I think that it can be really overwhelming. Like, we think, well, I'm just one person and I'll donate here and I'll participate in this, or I'll, march there, I'll sign that petition. And sometimes it feels like it's this little drop in this huge, engine of something that's trying to just spread that kind of hate, intolerance. But if none of us did anything, right, then there wouldn't be this organization and other organizations. And so it's just pushing back. And I always think about that, if one person helps one person and like everybody did that,
Yeah.
how powerful that can be. So that's why.
It's kind of the same thing with empathy.
With what?
With empathy, if everybody just practiced that a little bit, we'd be in a better place.
Exactly.
Sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, so when our book started getting banned, like this was before Authors Against Book Bans started, and I started watching these school board meetings a lot. They could live stream them. You can watch school board meetings from anywhere in the world. So here from Korea, I'm watching people use my book as a weapon to scream at librarians and teachers and call them the most horrible names, and basically just try and ruin their lives, take away their jobs, threaten them with prison time for having books that they don't like. And seeing my book used as a weapon like that, and watching the same people come every month and give these speeches, and no one getting up behind them to say, hey, actually, I think books are good and librarians are cool. I started, every time my book was banned, I started flying to the US. I'd fly 7,000 miles to go speak at the next board meeting and just say, hey, I think this is cool what your librarians are doing. And I saw how much this meant to people. And also I saw how much, like, for example, I went to Kentucky to do this, and I was terrified because I went up, nobody knew I was coming. I literally just flew in from Korea. And they were voting on like police stuff that day. So like every single person, the police department was sitting next to me, all these sour faces. And I got up and gave the speech. And I'm like, I don't know how that went. Everyone stared at me all weird. And then every person came up to me in the hallway afterward and said, hey, just so you know, I'm actually on your side. I don't talk about it because like, I don't want to cause trouble with all these other people, but like, I support you. And I'm like, sir, every single person in the room has told me the same thing, including your boss. If all you talked, maybe you'd realize that the people doing this are 2 people from Ohio that drive in once a month and have no children in the school district. And so I kept doing this. And then once Authors Against Book Bans came around, I was so happy because suddenly there's this entire network of people. And like, I don't have this pain of like, I guess I have to fly 7,000 miles because no one else is doing this. And now there's so many people doing it. And it's really exciting because around the time we were starting, there was the statistic going around that year, it's been a while, like 80% of all book bans were done by 11 people. And so, and again, those 11 people usually have no kids in the school district, only live in the area. And within a few days, I'm seeing like thousands and thousands of members of Authors Against Book Bans. And I'm like, this shows that there's so many more people that care about protecting these books and protecting the kids that need to read them. And so, yeah, I think it's really important for authors to step up, because these librarians are literally risking their safety, their careers. In some states, not that anyone has been charged with a felony, but in Florida, they can literally be charged with a felony for stocking our books because one person complained about them. So they are doing so much that I think it's important for authors to be like, hey, let me have your back in whatever way I can. So I'm very excited the Authors Against Book Bans exist, and that's why I jumped at becoming a member.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I'm a late adopter to Authors Against Book Bans. I didn't know about it. And that's the crazy thing, is that the discoverability of things like Every Library and Authors Against Banned Books, like sometimes the discoverability is not there. And so people aren't aware. And, there are probably parents at home who don't want to ban books and they don't know what to do. They're, tired from working all day. Then they have to make their kids lunch and dinner, and they're busy, and they want to fight the good fight, but they don't know what to do. And that's why it's great to join something like Every Library, so you can sign up, so you can help, so you can be part of the solution rather than the problem. On Monday, I was actually speaking in Salt Lake City. PEN America and Every Library flew me up there. And Rebecca Cummings, who is a librarian, is now running for lieutenant governor of Utah. And I'm like, this would be amazing to have a librarian help running a state. If we could have more librarians working in our government, I mean, education would be so much better in this country. So yeah, if you're a librarian out there, please run for state or Congress or senator or House of Representatives or president. I mean, that would be great. Okay, next question. Authors Against Book Bans is a volunteer-led organization with groups around the country. What local library or school campaigns are y'all tracking? How do anti-censorship organizers ask you to help? Those are hard questions. I'll do the first one first. What local library or school campaigns are y'all tracking, or that you're aware of?
I've been following something called Children's Book Project here in San Francisco, which is a nonprofit organization that provides books for free to children from under-resourced communities. And so far in 2024, they've received about 130,000 donations of books, and they've given away a little over 100,000. So, if you want to look them up, Children's Book Project, they take donations. You can do a one-time financial contribution if you want, but they're fighting the good fight here in the Bay Area, and so I've been trying to follow them and donate where I can.
Love that.
I'm watching my own district so far. I haven't seen anything. We're right outside of New York City, and it tends to be a fairly kind of open-minded community. But I'm just watching, because you just never know when things turn. But I do depend on PEN America and Authors Against Book Bans and these organizations. That's kind of how I track things and track numbers. And then also just sort of keeping an eye on, my local area in case, I want to step in or do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, it's that's the great thing about being part of a group like Authors Against Book Bans, is everyone's kind of looking out in their little corner and posting notes of what they know, so everyone's able to kind of look at what everyone's doing. And I'm a member of a lot of book banners have their own little secret groups that I've got sock puppets in and kind of watch what they're doing, and I have access to like all their notes and read what they're up to and what they're attacking. And yes, I try to keep an eye on everything, and just try to let every librarian know that I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And yeah, some of the specific ones that I've been looking at, like I mentioned going to Kentucky, and that was a big education in seeing how little these people that are banning the books actually know. Because like I said, like I've actually become pen pals with every person that's ever banned my book, and just asking them what's up. And every time they're like, "Oh, I haven't read your book." And I realized they genuinely don't read the books, because when I went to Kentucky, I was confused as to why the children's book "Are You My Mother" was banned. The little bird that's trying to find its mommy, and I found out they'd confused it with the Alison Bechdel book with a similar name. And then I said that at the meeting, and then one of them was like, one of the council members was like, okay, I get they made a mistake with that, but I heard that the book Let's Talk About It was in the children's section. Let's Talk About It, of course, by Erica Moen, a sex education guide. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. And she's like, well, I heard it. And I'm like, well, we're in front of the library. Do you want to go in and check? She's like, well, there's no way to know. I went in the library and found out that the book she was referring to is actually Let's Talk About It, Elmo's Guide to Conflict Resolution. And I'm like, ma'am, this is a Sesame Street book. So not only do they not read the books, they don't even make sure they're banning the right book. So that's I like digging into like those details of seeing the very specifics of how these books are being banned and how fake it all is, that they're just pretending they're like getting these lists and just pretending they're knowledgeable what's in these books, and they have not read a single one of them.
Manufactured outrage.
Mm-hmm.
I won't mention names, but there is someone in my family who I guess 10 years ago started a book burning club in Tennessee. They only burned Harry Potter books because it promoted witchcraft. And I asked her, have you ever read Harry Potter? She was like, of course not. It promotes witchcraft. So I'm like, it promotes a lot of stuff like compassion and friendship and all kinds of positive stuff. I don't think witchcraft is necessarily what it's pushing, but to each their own. I do find it, rather than react with anger, I believe in compassion, kindness, and I sat her down. I was like, let's have a conversation about this. And we talked a long time, and I don't know that I got through to her, but I think it's good to sit down with these people and have honest conversations like what Ryan's doing, to really see if they're reading the books, to see if they know what they're banning. I think probably 9 times out of 10, they do not, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I remember, just speaking of book burning. So, I grew up in Connecticut, and the town that we lived in before we lived in the town that I grew up in, not that it's so radically different, but in the other town in Fairfield County, there was a book burning. And my sister and I were really little, and we were about to enter the public schools. And so my parents decided, and probably for a few other reasons, decided to move. I think they were already thinking about moving, but they're like, you know what, they wanted to, get a bigger house. And they're like, let's not do that in this town, because they had a book burning. And so we moved to the next town. But, and that was probably in the late 1970s. And they had a friend who owned a bookstore, and he put all of the books. And I remember Julie of the Wolves was one of the books that was in the book burning, because there's a scene, I haven't read it since I was a kid, where she's sexually assaulted. I think that's like a big part of what the book is about. So he just put all the books that were in this book burning, in the front cases of his bookstore in that town. But I think that's certainly a way to kind of counteract, to just sort of, how can you give books, how can you center the books that are being banned in the spaces that you're in if they're being taken out of a school library?
Yeah, we live in a world where poverty is a problem, domestic violence is a problem, sexual assault is a problem, home instability is a problem. And yet these books that are about these topics are being taken out of the library. Kids can't see themselves. Kids who don't understand that can't develop empathy. Books are a gateway to so many positive things. And it's unfortunate that they're being attacked when they're such bigger problems. Like, let's use our resources to actually help people than tell them what not to read.
Right.
There's so many good organizations out there. I'm trying to remember all of them. Access Books here in LA. There's one in the King's English does in Salt Lake City. Another one that's my favorite is the Rainbow Bus that comes from Alstora and Shop Queer, which goes around the country delivering books for they're all queer books, but they're given out to communities to help them read, and for kids to choose books that they can relate to or see themselves in. or again, just like read about other people and develop empathy.
Right, because book banning is banning people. That's what it is. It's banning this person isn't allowed, this experience isn't allowed. You're being, you're not allowed here.
Yeah. Let's see. Another question. Through your involvement with Authors Against Book Bans, what do y'all hope that readers will understand about libraries and free speech?
Well, that it's everything. Sorry.
No.
Just that it's everything. It's everything that, I think people sometimes think that stories or, books or art are kind of these extra things that aren't important. And they are the main ways that we communicate the human experience to each other. And so if you have all of your basic needs met, that's like the next thing that makes living. And even if you don't, I mean, there's people who just will risk their lives to sort of put out what they have to say, express themselves, make stories, to communicate their experiences. And so it is like, it's life, and we must protect it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to echo that, really. I mean, they're absolutely vital. Librarians, libraries, school librarians and school libraries. They're essential to the preservation of democracy and of knowledge. They were library, or they were the internet, essentially, before the internet existed, and they certainly shouldn't be replaced by the internet. There's still a wealth of information and knowledge there, and you could go to outer space, you could travel to different countries, you could do this all in this one location where you have people to help guide you too. So I think they're absolutely essential for a thriving society.
So Veera, Ryan, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I say, like, to me, I think you were talking about these books that have sexual assault and things that people say children shouldn't have to experience through books. But the thing is, people experience these things in life. Yeah. And you just using, I mentioned I wrote a book with my friend Amy Rose named Occulted. That's her true story of how she grew up in a UFO death cult. And it was through reading books about cults that she escaped. Like, she would have been stuck in that cult if she hadn't learned about people in situations like that. Mm-hmm. And that book was not an easy one for her to write. Like, every time she worked on it, she would bring up all these memories of horrible things she'd been through, but she knew that somewhere there's a kid like her that this book could save that kid's life. And so it's very important that these books are on a shelf that for someone that might need them to recognize the situation that they're in. And even though that's what we care about, the people that are banning these books, it's not about books for them. It's not about it. Like I mentioned, these are small groups of people. A lot of these organizations we hear about, I've looked into them, I've talked to them. It's one person that calls himself an organization. They get funding from right-wing groups. And like I said, they don't read the books, but also the reason they're getting funding is because the people that are funding it, they profit from private schools and they want to weaken public education. And also they are representing politicians that are spreading hatred, and they don't want people to build empathy for the type of people they don't want in society. And so that's why they're banning books about queer people, people of color. Like, some of the books we've seen banned are like children's books about Asian food, because I guess Asian food is too woke because it's not white people food. I don't know. And so we know that they don't read the books, but the problem is that they are more than happy to just go on TV and lie and just say they're putting porn in schools and walk away. And then people hear that and they must believe it. Whereas we care about context and history, and I care about showing the historical context of what I learned through these books. And so our message takes longer to listen to. So people will just say, well, I heard they're putting porn in schools. So what I hope people know is that librarians care very much about children and what they read. And just because a book is on a shelf doesn't mean every child has to read it, but it's there for the child whose life it could save. And librarians are, again, risking their lives to make sure kids have this access. And you talked about book burning. If someone wants to burn their personal copy of my book, that's great. They still bought it. I got my money. I don't care. That's their freedom of speech. And I'm free to be like, oh, wow, what a total loser. Why are you burning books? But what they cannot do is decide what everyone else can read, what can be in a library, and what ideas are allowed to be discussed by other people. So I hope people realize how important this is, because like you said, it's about banning the people. First, I've talked to so many people, again, who risk their lives, and they always say, first they come for the books, then they come for the people. And that's what's kind of happening in Florida. Since I started giving these talks about banned books, it used to be like, they're going to come for the people. And then I started hearing, oh, they're threatening to put librarians in prison. Oh, they're talking about taking trans kids from their families. So this is something that we need to care about. And there are people who are fighting. There's authors book bans, there's library groups, there's librarians. Give them also the support you can. And if you can just go to a library board meeting or a city council meeting and just say, get up there and say it. I've done it. Like I said, I've flown out, but it means so much more from someone in the community. Even if you think there's no book banning being done in your area, trust me, your librarians are dealing with it. Just go stand up in front of a board. Anyone can do it. Just write down your name. They call you up and you say, hey, I think librarians are great. They give books to kids, and I hope you support them in keeping those books on the shelves. It'll make so much difference, because the people that show up every month are calling them horrible, horrible names, making terrible accusations, and that's all the people in power here. If you just get up and one person says, I think they're doing a good job, it'll make a world of difference where you live.
It's never about protecting kids. It's always about subjugation, and that's the reality.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So Veera, if you could say something to librarians, like perhaps those here now, what would you say to them?
Of course, I'm grateful for what you do. But also just, I know that this isn't what librarians signed up for, in the sense that they have a job to do. And this is affecting their ability to do their jobs. And that I will always do what I can to make their jobs easier, because they put books in kids' hands. And what a beautiful thing that is. And I have my own memories of libraries being just a quiet, safe space for me to choose whatever I wanted to read that were on the shelves. And I watch, and I couldn't find my experiences in books in the 70s and 80s. And so I've seen such an enormous change as I've started publishing and writing, and it's incredible to see. And now we're all watching it kind of tried to be taken back. So I don't know, just we're here with you. You're not alone. That's what I would say.
Alex, how about you? If you could say something to teachers and educators who are listening, what would you tell them?
You guys are criminally underpaid, criminally underappreciated. My mother was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. I have nothing but the utmost respect and love for educators out there. They are incredibly important and indelible to our communities and our society. They help, they help unlock imagination and build dreams and help these kids kind of realize who they might be. And without those safe spaces that teachers provide, we're kind of going to be lost. So it's not just your fight alone. We are here fighting with you. There are people out here who have your back, and you guys rock. So just keep going.
Awesome. Well said. Ryan, if you could say something to young readers, what would that be?
There are lots of cool books out there, and I hope you go out there, dig through the stack, find one that means something to you, and read it and tell people about it. Because every book you read, whether you agree with it or whether you don't, you're going to learn something about the world. And just because you see a book doesn't mean everything in it is true, doesn't mean everything in it is something you have to believe in, but it's important to read books and figure out what you feel about them, and read more books and talk to more people to get an idea of what you feel about the world. And just try to learn as much about people different from you, because everyone's different from you. And the more we can empathize with each other, know about each other, and love each other, the better the world's going to be. So listen to each other's stories and tell your own stories.
Well said. There is a restaurant in Texas called El Arroyo, and they have a big funny sign that they're always putting funny sayings on it. And one of them is, "I have been chasing the high of the scholastic clubs and fairs ever since I was a kid." I love that saying. I think about it all the time because I remember if my abuela gave me $5 and I went to the scholastic clubs and I got to choose my own book or go through those flyers and pick a book, like I felt so empowered. But going to the library, you don't even have to have money. You can just walk in and there is literally a world of books. And if you talk to the librarians, they will help kids find books, and it's so amazing. And so that's why it's great that every library is helping to empower libraries to stop book banning. And I'm so glad we're all here to discuss this. It's such an important topic. I think we'll be wrapping up soon. So before that, I just want to ask or take a moment for each of you to tell us what you're working on next. Veera, why don't you go first?
Well, I have my first picture book out right now called The Greatest. And that is kind of comes from memories of my own grandfather, who was kind of a larger than life character. And he thought of himself as just, kind of a simple man, but he was just a really creative, big personality. And so I created a story illustrated by Vesper Stamper to kind of celebrate how we all think that, the people we love are the greatest people in the world. So I'm excited about that. It just came out.
Awesome. Ryan, how about you? What are you working on?
Yeah, my new book comes out on October 1st that I made with my wife, Kim Hyun-suk. It's called No Rules Tonight. We have been incredibly thankful for all the love librarians have shown for Banned Book Club. This is our new story. It's about how there were curfews in Korea in the 1970s and 80s, where if you're out after midnight, you go to jail. And the only exception to that, because the curfew was originally started by American soldiers, they had an exception for a night that meant something to them, but didn't mean much for a lot of Koreans, December 24th. So in Korea, Christmas Eve was the one night where you could stay out all night, do whatever you wanted. And so we made a book about what would you do with one night of freedom. And of course, it has Hyun-suk dealing with considering restarting the Banned Book Club, where she would now have to be the leader because all the other members have graduated. And kind of dealing with that while all her friends are dealing with their own ideas of like, what do we do? We have this one night of freedom. What do we?
That's so cool. I mean, it's weird, like the stuff you learn. I mean, like I didn't know that about Korea, and it blows my mind. Alex, how about you? What's next for you?
Just finished illustrating an 8-page anthology piece that a friend of mine wrote. It's not quite announced yet, but it's tangentially related to Scott Snyder and his students.
Okay.
So that will hopefully be good. There's going to be a Kickstarter for that soon. I'll be doing something. I'm not sure if I'm even supposed to talk about it, but I have another anthology piece that I'll be working on early next year for a very fun licensed property project. I have a friend who has brought me on board to illustrate the graphic novel adaptation of her memoir, which will be probably starting on next year and will come out through a publisher that we both love, really well known. I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say. So lots of projects. Oh, and another graphic novel that I'm hoping to pitch with my agent pretty soon. So a lot of irons in the fire.
I have 3 books coming out that maybe will get banned. Pizza Face, which is already out, which is about going through puberty. And I'm sure that's a very touchy subject in some places. And then next year I have Dan of Green Gables, which is a retelling of Anne of Green Gables, but through a young queer boy's perspective. And it's kind of my love letter to some homophobic relatives in Tennessee. And then I have When We Ride, which is, it's fiction, but it's based on my senior year when I was struggling to go to college and make good grades. And I was driving around my best friend to sell drugs. And I would do my homework in the car while he was out selling weed and pills and powder. And the thing about that is, I mean, this is a reality. As we said earlier, like kids live through some weird stuff these days. They are seeing some wild stuff on the internet. So rather than ban books, we should give them books that might provide context and really help them.
Also, if they're old enough to experience and be the target of that kind of intolerance and hatred, they're old enough to read those books.
Agreed. So Alex, why don't you tell people where they can find you on socials?
I'm mostly on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Basically, my name. Instagram and Twitter is AJ Schumacher Art. Yeah, and then my website, which was right there, alexschumacherart.com. Good thing they're spelling it out because that can be trouble for some people. But yeah, that's where I am, and I try to post fairly regularly. But I'm old, so sometimes I don't.
Ryan, how about you? Where can people find you?
If you go to ryanestrada.com, all the links are there to whatever you're using. And while you're there, you can find info about my books. And there are just thousands and thousands of pages of free comics you can just read right now because I'm a terrible businessman and I should be promoting my books. But I'm like, whatever. There's a bunch of stuff you can read for free.
Why not?
Veera, how about you? Where do people find you?
On my website, and I'm mostly on Instagram and X, Twitter, and on Facebook, but less public on Facebook. And also, I just want to say, for any authors out there, all the authors out there, if you are writing something, you're like, oh, I wonder if this could be banned, like, write it. Lean into that. I'm working on a YA right now, and I am leaning in. This book is going to be so banned, or hopefully it comes out. But, it just like lean in, and just write what's in your heart. Don't censor yourself, because that's also something that can happen.
Yeah, for real. People can find me at www.rexogle.com. I'm on Instagram at @3rdrex. Go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. I do sneak peeks and book giveaways and talk about things like every library. So yeah, to wrap up, this is Every Library Live. I want everyone watching to take a moment to think about how you can help safeguard libraries and the right to read. Every Library is a donor-supported organization that is at work every day fighting against censorship and discrimination. Please consider making a donation today to help them continue their critically important work. Please go to everylibrary.org/2024 to donate now. Every reader out there will appreciate it. Thank you again to each of you, Veera, Ryan, Alex. This has been a great discussion. And for you viewers, come back tomorrow for more great conversations like this on Every Library Live. Take care out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.